Good to see you today. I hope you're having a good day. We're going to be looking at the account. It's a strange account. It's one of the blind men that is healed by the Lord. You'll know why it's strange here in just a moment. Our hymn today is Stepping in the Light.
Trying to walk in the steps of the Savior, trying to follow our Savior and King, shaping our lives by His blessed example. Happy, how happy the songs that we bring. How beautiful to walk in the steps of the Savior, stepping in the light, stepping in the light. How beautiful to walk in the steps of the Savior, led in paths of light.
To our passage, Matthew 8, verse 22. Then he came to Bethsaida, and they brought a blind man to him and begged him to touch him. So he took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the town. And when he had spit on his eyes and put his hands on him, he asked him if he saw anything. And he looked up and said, I see men like trees walking. Then he put his hands on his eyes again and made him look up, and he was restored and saw everyone clearly. Then he sent him away to his house, saying, Neither go into the town, nor tell anyone in the town. As I said, it's an odd miracle, even with the miracles usually being odd. The first thing I wanted to mention is you have the business about him when he had spit on his eyes and put his hands on them. Sometimes the Lord would put his fingers in people's ears and make mud with the ground and, different things like that. And there is a little bit of, I heard a preacher one time talk about showmanship, because the Lord doesn't have to do these things. Well, then why do them? The Lord, like with the centurion that we reference, seems like on a regular basis, he just gives the word and it's done. Well, then why does he spit on his eyes and put his hands on him? You might notice they brought a blind man to him and begged him to touch him. In some ways, the people expected a show. For example, the woman said, if I touch the hem of his garment. And when she touched the hem of his garment, she was healed. By her faith, she was made well by the power of the Lord. And they beg Jesus to touch him. And so Jesus does that. And there is an expectation of a little bit of a show, and also the point's been made that they need to understand it's the Lord doing this, that it's not just happening, but by the Lord touching an individual, they're seeing that the person is healed by the Lord's touch, that it is indeed Jesus doing these things. And so you might consider it the showmanship of Jesus, if you will, so that they would understand what these things were showing and signifying, that it was indeed Jesus. Okay, now we'll talk about the trees, I suppose, last. Let's look at verse 26 next. Neither go into town nor tell anyone. Why would he say that? Why would he, in verse 22, he comes to Bethsaida, they bring him a blind man, and he takes the blind man by the hand and leads him out of the town. And he tells him, do not go into the town, nor tell anyone in the town. The only answer I have, as a possibility, it's Bethsaida. And in Matthew chapter 11, at verse 21, the Lord is rebuking unrepentant cities. And one of them, lo and behold, is Bethsaida. Woe to you, Chorazin! Woe to you, Bethsaida! For if the mighty works which were done in you had been done in Tyre and Sidon, they would have repented long ago in sackcloth, if I could speak today, and ashes. And so when we come to Mark 8 and we see the account, the Lord was not happy with the folks in Bethsaida. And a miracle was being done. And he doesn't want the people in Bethsaida to see it. And he doesn't want the man to go back to Bethsaida so they could see it. No. They brought a blind man to him. And perhaps they brought him from another place. But he's in Bethsaida. And so they don't get to see the work in Bethsaida. He intentionally leads the man out of town. Okay. Now that brings us to the odd part of the miracle. The oddest part. Did he not know what he was doing when he healed the man? Did he only heal him halfway? The man says, I see men like trees walking. So he put his hands on his eyes again and made him look up, and he was restored. What, did he just not have his hands in the right place before? Did it just take a little bit more spit? I hope you don't think that's the case. Surely that's not the case. Surely there's something more significant than that going on. And I'm not sure I fully know the answer, but I'll give you my thoughts on it, and you can just think about it. In the account, in Mark's account, there's 2 blind men that are healed. And it almost looks like they're bookends. So you have this man, and it's like, okay, can you see? There in verse 23 and 24. Well, I can see, but not clearly. I see men like trees walking. Okay, so I can see, but not clearly. And then afterwards, then he could see everyone clearly. All right, we start going through the account. The very next account is Peter confessing Jesus as the Christ. Okay, who do you say that I am? Peter answered, you're the Christ. Oh, so you can see clearly, right? Everything's good based on that passage. Well, then the very next passage, Jesus talks about his death and resurrection, and Peter takes him aside and begins to rebuke him. So I'm not sure Peter's seeing very clearly after all, are you? I mean, he sees a little bit, but I'm not sure he's seeing everything. In Mark chapter 9, you have the transfiguration. And we know what Peter's going to say here in the account of Peter, James, and John, as Peter answers, Rabbi, it's good for us to be here. And God himself says, this is my beloved son, hear him. Then you have the boy with the unclean spirit. And so the disciples could not cast out a demon, and they want to know what's going on. Why they could not cast out that demon, why they did not have that power. Jesus says this kind only comes out with fasting and prayer. Then you have Jesus again talking about his death and resurrection. They did not understand this saying. Verse 32. They're seeing a little bit, but they're still not seeing real clear, are they? And yet, even though they don't understand what he's saying, what do they argue about? Who's the greatest? Verse 33. Then you have them forbidding someone else from casting out demons in the Lord's name because he did not follow them. Jesus says, do not forbid him. Then you have not causing others to sin. Don't pay attention to the highlights. This isn't what we're talking about today. But you have that verse. Not stumbling, not causing others to stumble. Then you have teaching about divorce, and where Jesus talks about because of the hardness of their hearts, Moses allowed certain things. Then you have let the little children come to me, where once again the disciples rebuke those who did that, and Jesus was greatly displeased and rebuked them instead. Then you have the rich young ruler in that account. And you have Peter saying, well, we've left everything and followed you. All right, well, what will we have? Then Jesus talks about his death a third time. Then you have James and John saying, Oh, well, we want to sit one on your left and one on your right. Once again, arguing about who the greatest is, making everybody else real mad. And then you have Jesus healing blind Bartimaeus. And so you have the second bookend, and then you go into Jerusalem. So, I wonder if the first miracle, if the, well, I can see, but not clearly, if it almost starts becoming an object lesson for the disciples. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Can you see real clearly? We don't really understand the things that are happening. They didn't understand. In time, they would. In time, they would see things clearly, sort of like the man after the Lord puts his hands on him again. In time, they would. Afterward, they would see clearly. Perhaps it's just something to consider with the miracle. It's an odd miracle. I hope you don't think that the man could not see clearly the first time because of some shortcoming of the Lord. Surely that's not what's going on. Something to meditate on, I suppose. Appreciate you. Hope you have a good day. Join us tomorrow for another portion of our daily praise.